What's up everybody, welcome to SafeBuys. I'm Safe, and today let's compare the 32-inch LG GQ950 to the 27-inch Sony InZone M9. I narrowed down my search to these two when looking for the best console gaming monitor that would still hold its own for everyday work and web browsing on a MacBook. Quick disclaimer, I'm not a professional monitor reviewer, just someone working from a 9 to 5 from home, looking for the best monitor for everyday use. Now both the GQ950 and InZone M9 are IPS panel gaming monitors primarily geared towards gaming, supporting full 4K resolution, 120Hz variable refresh rates, and HDR capabilities on the latest next-gen consoles. I'm deliberately focusing on console gaming capabilities here as I'm not as of yet a PC gamer, nor do I own a PC, so sorry to disappoint, but will not be able to form an opinion on that front. In light of that, let me just put the exact hardware specs up here so we can get that out of the way. As you can see, all in all, they're fairly similar, at least for someone using them for work and console gaming. As for price, I've seen the Sony InZone M9 range from $850 to $900 and the LG GQ950 from $1,000 to $1,300. You can check Amazon for the latest prices using the links in the description, but just so you know where I'm coming from, I managed to grab the LG GQ950 for around $950 and the Sony InZone M9 for $900. As I find it hard to believe most people, including myself, would buy a monitor at this price point and use it exclusively for gaming, 50% of my decision here will be based on the experience using them for work in my 9 to 5 on my MacBook Pro, and the other 50% for their gaming performance on consoles, specifically PlayStation 5 in my use. If you're looking for a quick conclusion here, I'll let you know I'm keeping the LG GQ950 and returning the Sony InZone M9. This is despite my love for all things Sony and more specifically PlayStation, and while I really wanted to like the InZone M9, at the end I had to acknowledge that the GQ950 is just the better value and an overall experience for the price I paid. While there are many differences and reasons for my preference for the GQ950, I think it came down primarily to three reasons. One, the screen size and perceived better value for the price I paid. That is, I was able to get the 32-inch screen for just $50 more than the 27-inch InZone M9. That was this past holiday season. Two, the text clarity and scaling on my MacBook Pro. I just felt like the GQ950 was able to provide me with something that felt closer to using the native MacBook Pro built-in laptop display, which is ultimately the gold standard in my eyes. And of course, three, the response time, refresh rate, and effectively motion blur handling when playing fast-paced games like Call of Duty. This is to say, like, motion just felt more smooth to me on the GQ950, and I felt like I played better as a result. Hey guys, I just wanted to emphasize that I don't think the Sony InZone M9 is a bad monitor at all. I realized throughout this video after filming it, I mentioned a lot of bad points about it in comparison to the GQ950, but let's just keep in mind this is one of the only 27-inch 4K IPS HDMI 2.1 panel monitors with full array local dimming available in the market, as of the time of filming this video. So it's a great monitor in its own right, and if anything, like, I was originally going to keep the Sony InZone M9 until like I started to lean more towards the GQ950 over time. So let's just keep that in mind as you watch the rest of this video, because I realize I'm throwing a lot of shade at the Sony InZone M9. Anyway, that's it. Some other quick conclusions on both of these monitors are that I don't think either is all that impressive for single player games, because the HDR local dimming on blacks on both of these just aren't that impressive compared to OLED TVs and even the new 27-inch 1440p OLED monitors that LG and Asus just released. Yeah, like, I've got my LG CX right there, 65 inches, and OLED is way better for single player games. However, if you're adamant on 4K, don't want a bigger screen than 32 inches, and don't mind a 1000R curve on the monitor, I think the more expensive Samsung Odyssey Neo G8 might be better for single player games, and even the now fairly discounted Samsung Odyssey Neo G7, which honestly, since it's not that much more expensive than the monitors we're comparing today, I ended up buying that too, just to see if it beats out the GQ950. I'll try posting a video comparison on those two soon. That is the GQ950 versus the Odyssey Neo G7. And of course, if all of these sound outside your budget for a gaming monitor, I know for me, like, not that long ago, they would have been way outside my budget. Perhaps check out my other video where I compare the GQ950 to another much cheaper 32-inch LG monitor. I'll link that up here somewhere, but it's pretty crazy the quality you can get for not that much money these days. Now, if you don't care for diving into further depth on these points and found some help here, like found any of this helpful, I would appreciate if you drop a like on the video, and of course feel free to subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. I'll be posting not just monitor review comparisons, but also headphones, iPhone accessories, and other cool tech that I like to buy. Anyway, now let's dive into the nuances of my experience with both of these monitors, starting off with the screen size. I prefer the GQ950's larger 32-inch screen size, despite the fact that my desk and space here in my condo, as you can see in there, it's tiny. So it allowed me to see more, like basically the larger screen size on the GQ950 allowed me to see more and have more options when adjusting how I'm sitting. Whether I want to lay back or sit upright, I just felt like I could dial in my ideal viewing range. I also found the MacBook display scaling was just more usable at a wider range of text sizes compared to on the 27-inch Sony InZone M9. So basically, I was able to dial in that sweet spot scaling resolution for me at 2560 by 1440, whereas with the Sony at my ideal viewing distance, it was only really usable at the 1920 by 1080 scaling configuration. That made the text too big for my liking, and it was further limited by the smaller screen size, which effectively wasted otherwise usable screen real estate. Of course, if I was dead set on 27 inches being the better size for competitive gaming, since that is what is standard in esports these days, I think, I would probably swing for the new LG 1440p 240Hz OLED monitor, which might even end up scaling better, albeit at a lower 1440p resolution on my MacBook. Anyway, jumping back to performance on my MacBook, if I were to use the MacBook Pro display as my reference point of the ideal text size, clarity, and colors, I would say the LG scales and has colors that more closely match that of my MacBook display. Though to my eyes, it's definitely not as good. Like the MacBook display is unmatched really for me. But then again, these gaming monitors, they were never intended to be like used like primarily as editing monitors or work monitors. So I can't really ding them too much for that. They're like great in their own regard. As for refresh rates on my MacBook, I was able to get both to display at 144 Hz, either fixed or variable, though I still didn't find the experience to look as smooth as the ProMotion offered on the 14 and 16-inch M1 MacBook Pros. Also, quick warning, if you do have an older Intel-based 2019 16-inch MacBook like I did, or potentially any Intel-based MacBook, I wasn't able to get 144 Hz out of either of these monitors on the MacBook. Rather, I appeared restricted to 60 Hz max, and I did find the input switching and changing of display settings on my MacBook to be much laggier on both of the monitors compared to when I was using a silicon-based M1 Pro or M1 Max MacBook. Though I definitely should mention that to my eyes, the difference in experience between 60 Hz and 144 Hz on these monitors isn't as game-changing or as noticeable to me as ProMotion is on the MacBook M1 Pro and Max displays, and definitely not as jarring as going from a 60 Hz iPhone display to the 120 Hz ProMotion on the iPhone 13 and 14 Pro and Pro Maxes. Moving on to HDR performance, while the superior 96 zone full array local dimming on the Sony InZone M9 compared to the 32 edge-lit dimming zones on the GQ950 does provide a better HDR experience when gaming, it just doesn't make up for the smaller screen size when enjoying single-player games, which are primarily where you would want to enjoy full HDR anyway. That is opposed to multiplayer games like Call of Duty, where I would opt for no HDR and get a smoother, faster response time, which by the way is something I've noticed is significantly easier to turn off and on the LG GQ950 on the PlayStation 5, despite what Sony might say about the InZone's benefits of true HDR auto tone mapping, which honestly isn't a big deal. Like what auto HDR tone mapping is that the display basically will automatically set the brightness on these HDR config screens that the PS5 walks you through when using a new monitor or TV for the first time. But on my first setup with PS5, it actually just walked me through the HDR config screens like any other monitor or TV. So what I'm trying to say is, and forgive me if I'm off base, as I very well could be, but manually configuring the HDR settings on the PS5 that one time on initial setup is far from a hassle, and I might even result in a better perceived HDR to your eyes and your setting, like if you're in a bright room or a dark room, instead of using this auto HDR tone mapping. And HDR TV Test, the YouTube channel, has confirmed this in one of his videos where he says like manually configuring it is better than basically relying on the auto tone mapping, because it depends on your setting, right? You might be in a really bright room, a dark room, and so it changes based on that to your eyes. As you can see, I'm able to easily switch between FPS mode and true HDR on the LG via a quick setting change, whereas on the Sony on PS5, I am locked from making any changes until I navigate to the PS5 display settings and turn off HDR entirely to be able to switch it out to a more FPS-friendly setting. Seriously, while you can play Call of Duty with HDR on and it does look more contrasty, I found myself always opting for, and I might be off base here, but what my eyes perceive to be a much smoother and faster response time on the FPS picture modes on the monitors, and that, for me, outweighed the colors looking more washed out in this setting. Like the FPS setting looks more washed out, but it pays dividends in the terms of how smooth the gameplay is when you're playing a fast, twitchy game like Call of Duty. And guys, I just can't overstate how much fun I had playing Modern Warfare 2 on the LG GQ950. I had some of my best games ever, and I enjoyed the game like I haven't in a long, long time. And while I also had fun on the InZone M9, I just can't say it was as enjoyable. Whether that's because of the GQ950's better response time, lower input lag, or maybe even just the slightly bigger display size, it's hard to say. I think it's a combination of all three. Also, be warned that HDR mode on MacBooks for both these monitors, it just looks odd. Like the colors look muted and brightness is low unless you're going to watch movies or something. But just for everyday browsing and work, I would turn off the HDR option in MacBook display settings. Moving on to the available ports on both of these, they pretty much have the same ports. I'll put them up here, except the Sony has a USB-C display port that outputs a near useless 15 watts of power and allegedly allows for KVM switch functionality, which honestly, I don't know what that is, nor do I care to know, but people are saying it doesn't work. Also, a big win for the GQ950 here is that the ports are conveniently located on the back instead of on the bottom of the monitor like the InZone M9, which quite frankly is horrible port placement that caused me to break an HDMI cable when I was using a VESA mount arm. Like on the Sony InZone 27-inch, I basically broke like a whole HDMI cable when I was just adjusting the screen on the VESA monitor arm mount. It like basically bent the HDMI cable and it like broke, and I tried to look for it, but I don't know where I put it. Drop a comment if you prefer the ports on the back of the monitor or on the bottom like on the Sony InZone M9. Let's touch on the onboard controls on each of these monitors real quick. So the GQ950 has this little toggle at the bottom, which I find way more convenient to me, like that it's at the bottom in the center of the screen as opposed to on the side where the controller, like the analog controller for the Sony InZone, it's like on the side. You have to reach out from the right hand side of the screen. And if you have a two monitor setup, it's going to be tougher to reach the Sony InZone's controller from the side. Whereas if you just have a single setup, I think you would be indifferent between having it on the side and at the bottom. Drop a comment if you prefer it one way or the other. I prefer it at the bottom because that way, regardless of if I have a dual monitor setup or not, it's easier to access the controller right at the bottom. Also, regarding the menu systems, I think, it's a toss-up. You might prefer one or the other. Originally, I was leaning towards the GQ950s, but Sony's menu system is pretty good too, especially for a first stab at it. And I realized how good the Sony's menu system is actually after using Samsung's. And holy, like Samsung is definitely, leagues behind either LG and Sony in terms of their menu system UI design. It seems like it's from a different like decade or something, to be honest. If you agree, like drop a comment. I was jarred. This was my first like Samsung monitor and I was like, wow, I guess Sony and LG really got it on lock. Anyway, that's it. Let's quickly touch on sound here. The InZone M9 has built-in speakers that are just not usable in my opinion. They significantly degrade the experience for whatever it is you're listening to. I always opt to use my MacBook speakers when working, even when the MacBook is docked, that is like closed in a clamshell, and I'm using just the monitor. The sound from the closed MacBook sounds literally 10 times better than the InZone M9. As for when I'm gaming, I find it hard to believe you're spending this much on a monitor and haven't already invested in a solid pair of gaming headphones. The LG GQ950 forgoes a speaker entirely, instead providing a DC DTS-X capable headphone jack, which I'm unsure what benefit that provides, but all of my headsets are wireless anyways, so I wasn't really curious enough to look anything up on the benefit provided by that specific port that they give you on the bottom of the GQ950. As for the stands these come with, the LG GQ950 one allows more adjustability up and down as well as decent swivel support. The Sony is just laughable in comparison, with a lot of people saying the whole stand moves when adjusting it to any degree, so since it's some weird tripod situation they got going on there, so it's just not that good. But honestly, as I said before, my desk is tiny, and so monitor stands really are not an option for me. And if I had a larger desk, I would certainly stick with a monitor arm still, since it provides way more adjustability and ease of use as well as space saving. Seriously, if you haven't tried using a monitor arm, you're missing out. I kind of wish all monitors just shipped with monitor arms. Though if you are getting a monitor arm or already have one, just note that the GQ950 is fairly heavy at 25.6 pounds, and so I needed to get a new monitor arm specifically for that. It cost me around like $50, I think. Anyway, that moves us over nicely to the final point here on build quality, and in a sentence, the LG GQ950, while a lot heavier, certainly feels better built with just higher quality materials, and I prefer the look as well. Even though I'm a fan of the PlayStation design, I'm just not a fan of the InZone M9's design. In fact, one big annoyance with the Sony InZone M9's design was that it was not able to support my Xiaomi monitor light bar. Like the bar when mounted securely would cover top part of the display, making it effectively unusable, and when adjusting it so that it doesn't cover the display, it would eventually fall back down or fall off entirely from the monitor. It supported my Insta360 Link webcam without issue though. The GQ950 on the other hand had no issues at all in this regard, like holding both my monitor light bar and my webcam without issue, since it has a basic rectangular body, right? Finally, the LG also has a much brighter and noticeable LED lighting on the back if you care for that. I'm indifferent on that front, but it's got that brighter LED if you care for it. And that's it. Thanks so much for watching this through. I hope you found something helpful, and if you're looking for current prices, I've got Amazon links in the description below. If you're looking to dive deeper into tech specs, try rtings.com or Monitors Unboxed YouTube channel. I always consult them before I buy any monitor. Also, if you own either of these monitors or a different monitor, I'm genuinely interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you agree, disagree with anything I said, yeah, just interested to hear your point of view. That's it, guys. That's Safe Buys. I'm Safe, signing out. Peace.